Hello and welcome to another song from the Witch's House. Today I'm sat in one of my bedrooms. Not that I've got that many, 3 bedrooms in this house, but this is the little box room that was my room as a child. This is the room that I grew up in. It was my little bedroom. It's a tiny little room, just had a single bed and a little bit of furniture. And then more recently, when we looked after my grandmother, this became her room and she really, really liked it. And I thought that I would sit and make a film in this room because the song that you've just heard is called Never Said Goodbye. And it was the first song that I ever wrote, basically. And it was the first song that I ever wrote because the lyrics were basically written when I was about 16 and a half, because I wrote it about going to my dad's funeral. And I suppose it felt right to make a film in this room, because this is the room that I grew up in as a child, and this is the room that my dad would have come in to tuck me up at night. And so here I am in my little box room. As I say, the room hasn't changed very much at all. I'll get David to show you around. The furniture that I've got is not particularly gothic in here, although I have gothicked it up with a little bit of a few gothic mirrors and cherubs and things. And although this furniture isn't probably still to my taste, I feel that I've got to keep it because this furniture represents all of those Saturday lunchtimes and weekend shifts that I did for Bernie Inns. I got my first job for Bernie Inns when I was about 12 and a half. I looked a lot older and the manager thought I was about 16, so he gave me a job, and I think I've been working there for about 2 years before the auditors came around and ticked him off and said, you employed someone who was only 12 and a half. And obviously I'm going back a few years, I won't say exactly how many, but yeah, so I saved up all my money to buy my own furniture for my bedroom. And because I look at this furniture and I think it represents all my hard graft as a child, basically, child labour, I don't really want to get rid of it. And because it's a small room, it needs small furniture. So I've gothicked it up a little bit, but this is basically now a spare room. It's our box room. And it's the room that I thought I would make a film in for this song, Never Said Goodbye. So as you know, I only tend to write sad songs, and I lost my dad when I was 16. He had a terrible battle against cancer, and in many ways I look back on those years and I think it's left me with a few phobias and things, because I do remember that we had an awful lot of time whereby the doctors were trying to diagnose what was wrong with him. And we kept being told, he had a bad back, he had a slipped disc, he had a virus. And it seemed to go on for months. We were always waiting for these results of tests. And then I can remember that they found out what was wrong with him. He had myeloma, bone cancer. He had it in his spine. You see, every time I make one of these films, Bugsy's got to come along. Come along then, if you want to come and say hello to everybody. Here he is. Here's my little Bugmeister. You want to say hello to everybody? You feeling okay? Yeah? You feeling okay? I love this little dog. He's my boy, aren't you? He's my soulmate, aren't you? I probably love him too much. Now, I'm going to put you down because you are a bit of a heavy lump and I've got to try and make one of these films. So say goodbye to everybody. Say goodbye. I love him. My dad wouldn't let me have any pets when he was alive. I think he thought you get too attached to them, then you lose them, or maybe we just couldn't afford them. But I did end up with a black cat. I would, wouldn't I? That followed me home one night and never left. And even my dad had to respect the fact that this cat wanted me as its owner. So I did end up having a cat, but only because a stray took a shine to me. So yeah, I was telling you about losing my dad because this is what this song was all about. So basically he had to go for all these tests, and I remember that my mum came in one day. She'd been to see the consultant, I think his name was Dr. Gillam, and she said to us, your dad's got cancer and they've given him 5 years. and he doesn't know yet. They're going to tell him tomorrow. And I remember we had to go and visit him that night, knowing what he didn't know. And I remember the next day we went to visit him. And I only got to the end of the ward and I looked at his face and I knew that they told him. And he was so brave. I remember his voice sort of tremoring a little bit while he said, "I just want a word with your mum by herself for a minute." And my heart just turned over because I knew what he was telling her. I knew what they told him. So it was a dreadful, dreadful time. And back in those days, they weren't able to give out morphine drivers. So we all had to learn how to do injections, and we had to practice on an orange with the flat side of the needle and the pointed side. And my brother, the one that's in the police force, he had a thing about needles, and I knew that he wasn't going to manage to do it. And I remember once Mum and I were out shopping and we came home and found my brother collapsed in the porch, all pale, like he'd virtually fainted, because he'd had to give my dad his diamorphine injection. He managed to do it, but he nearly passed out in the process. So we had a terrible, terrible, terrible time, and my dad was in a lot of pain, and the doctors got it wrong. He didn't have 5 years. He didn't even have 18 months. So he passed away when I was 16. And this song I wrote about the experience of going to my first ever funeral, because that was the first funeral I'd ever been to, my own dad's. And I couldn't believe how heavily it rained. I'd never seen rain like it. It just absolutely tipped down. We got absolutely drenched. The other thing I couldn't believe was how deep the hole is that they dig for a coffin. I think my mum had asked for a double plot so that she could go with him. That obviously made it extra deep. But yeah, that was something which, as a child, I mean, I didn't see myself as a child at the time, but I suppose I was, being fascinated by how deep this hole was. So this song then, very sad song, describing my experience that day of going to my first ever funeral, which was my dad's funeral. And it's called Never Said Goodbye because I didn't ever really say goodbye to him, because I never really believed he was going to die. You know, I think when you're the youngest and the only girl, you have a special relationship with your dad. Mum said I was the apple of his eye. I thought he was very strong and could sort out everything. And I never saw him succumbing to this terrible illness. But sadly he did. And I just felt compelled, I suppose, in a way. For me, creativity helps you get certain emotions, certain pains out of your system. Now, when I look around this room, I realise that you can see some of the things that I've started collecting in recent years. And one of the things I've started collecting is these sort of like wind-up dolls. Now, I don't know why I started collecting these. It only happened about 7 or 8 years ago. I was in a charity shop and I saw one similar to this, and it was only a couple of quid. And I just felt compelled to buy it, and I wasn't sure why. And then I kept seeing them everywhere, so I ended up buying quite a few. I mean, when you look at the workmanship that's gone into it, they're hand painted, they've got a musical little tune, there's something from yesteryear which always appeals to me. A lot of them play the same tune, unfortunately, but there are a few. This one plays Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, which I suppose is kind of ironic because that was all I saw at my dad's funeral, was just this dreadful rain. But the other day I was sitting down and it suddenly came to me why I felt compelled to buy these little things. And again, it's why I've decided to do this film in this particular room. Because as a child, I can remember when I was about 7 or 8, my dad went to visit one of his brothers up near, it was near Whitby Abbey, and he went to a toy shop and he came back with a doll similar to this, although I think the doll that was on top was made of cloth. And every night when he used to tuck me up, you know, your parents always come and tuck you up in bed when you go to bed when you're a child, he always used to wind up this doll. And I would hear it, obviously, until I went off to sleep. And he'd wind it up and it would go round, and I'd always listen out for when the mechanism started to labour and you knew that it was slowing down and it was very gradually grinding to a halt. And I always thought there was something quite sad and melancholy about that. And I've only wound this one up a very little bit so you can understand what I mean. It's almost like a heartbeat, how we go through life. You know, we start off all full of vim and vigour, ready to go through our notes, and then we get to our middle years and very gradually things start to slow down. And then I guess when you get into the latter years, things really struggle, like this is now. And very gradually you wend your way to the end and things stop. God, I'm being depressing, aren't I? But I think that's what I think of when I hear these dolls. It takes me back to all the times my dad used to tuck me up in bed and wind up my little bedside doll, which I still have up in the attic somewhere. So I've ended up collecting these little things, and I think subconsciously I've collected them because it reminds me of my dad. So Never Said Goodbye is a very sad, poignant song. As I say, the first one that I ever wrote in tribute to my dad. And I'm sure I'll get David to show you some pictures of me and my dad together in happier times. He only died at the age of, what was he, 54? He had no life really, and he did have a very, very difficult death. I will say a few more words about him, but I will save it for a future song, and then perhaps you'll understand why a lot of my songs are from a kind of gothic perspective. But anyway, thank you once again for coming to our channel. I hope you like the song Never Said Goodbye. It's available on Bandcamp should you wish to buy it. I know it's not one of David's favourites, but I felt like I had to include it because it was the first song that I ever wrote when I was about 16. Anyway, please send us a comment, please like and subscribe, and until we meet again on the next full moon. Oh, this song is going out in the month of August, and August is the month of peridot, and I have got some peridot, but I forgot to put them on. So I'll put them on when I make the next film. You know, sometimes I talk about precious stones and which ones go with which month. But anyway, I'm almost at the end of this one. So until we meet again on the next full moon or new moon, some witchy magic is coming your way.